South Korea takes Japan off its list of trusted trading partners in response to Japan's own trade curbs. Tokyo expresses regret over the move as Seoul publishes an explanation online in the Japanese language. South Korea reports a second case of African swine fever, a disease that's wiped out a third of China's pigs in the past year. Pig farms are on lockdown as the authorities work to contain the outbreak. And after the drone attacks in Saudi Arabia, the kingdom says it expects its oil production to get back to normal in just 2 or 3 weeks, much faster than expected. That sends oil prices back down to $60 a barrel. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning into our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. A second case of African swine fever has been confirmed at a pig farm in Yeoncheon, Gyeonggi-do province. The disease does not pose a risk to humans, but it's fatal to pigs. So the authorities are hard at work trying to stop it from spreading. Our Kim Jae-hee has the latest.
Pigs at a second farm in South Korea were confirmed early on Wednesday to have African swine fever. The farm in Yeoncheon County is 48 kilometers away from Paju, where the first case of the African swine fever was confirmed on Tuesday. The Agriculture Ministry has designated 6 cities and counties, including Paju, Yeoncheon, and Pocheon, as key management areas to prevent the spread of African swine fever. The ministry will mobilize all disinfection vehicles and prevention teams to the 6 regions. They have also extended the 1-week ban on pork shipments from farms in those regions to 3 weeks.
In any case of an outbreak of disease, the priority is to block the virus from spreading from the farm that it was detected in. Our main goal is to be as fast as possible to prevent the disease from spreading.
Pigs that were transported from the farm that saw the first case on Tuesday were also blocked from reaching the market and will all be culled by the end of the day. Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon also visited breeding farms and disinfection facilities in Pocheon on Wednesday and vowed all-out efforts to contain the outbreak and ensure stable pork prices.
What's for sure at this point is that the spread of the African swine fever took place through humans, animals, and transport vehicles. Based on that premise, we'll take swift and resolute measures.
The case comes only 4 months after North Korea revealed its own outbreak of African swine fever in late May. While it is speculated that the disease spread to the south from North Korea, authorities are currently working to discover the exact cause of the outbreak. African swine fever is a disease highly fatal to pigs with a near 100% mortality rate. It's highly contagious in pigs and no vaccine currently exists, but it's important to stress that the disease is harmless to humans. The disease has already affected the pork prices, though. The average auction price of pork traded at 14 major wholesale markets across the nation had increased by nearly 33% on May compared to the day before. However, the Agriculture Ministry says the recent spike in prices is only due to the temporary distribution ban. South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said Wednesday the government will continue to monitor the pork price trends and prepare for emergency measures to stabilize prices if necessary. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News, Yeoncheon.
The annual UN General Assembly is underway in New York, bringing together world leaders and diplomats from 193 member states. But the foreign minister of North Korea is not there. Our Kim Mo-gyun has this story.
World leaders gathered in New York on Tuesday for the United Nations General Assembly. The main event of the session, the General Debate, will run from September 24th to the 30th, with nearly 200 representatives from around the world taking to the floor to deliver their speeches. Following the UN tradition, Brazil will be the first to speak, followed by host country, the United States. South Korean President Moon Jae-in, who has attended the event for each of the past 3 years, is scheduled to speak on the first day of the debate. He is expected to bring up the peace process on the Korean peninsula and call for combined efforts to achieve lasting peace. President Moon is also scheduled to hold separate talks with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the session. For North Korea, Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho, who has also attended the event in previous sessions, will not show up this year. Instead, the country's ambassador to the UN, Kim Sung, will represent Pyongyang on the last day. With the stalled denuclearization talks between the U.S. and North Korea, Attention is focused on what the representatives of the two countries will say. Another hot potato during the session is whether the leaders of the U.S. and Iran will sit down for talks, as tensions have been escalating following major attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure, which Washington blamed on Iran. Alongside the general debate, high-level meetings are also set to be held throughout the session to discuss climate change and accelerate progress on sustainable development aimed at securing healthy, peaceful, and prosperous lives for all. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
Russia has seized 2 North Korean fishing boats and 80 crew, it says, were illegally fishing in Russian waters. The North Korean crew on one of the boats, when they were caught, reportedly attacked Russian agents and injured 3 of them. The boats and crew were taken to Russia's Nakhodka port. Moscow's foreign ministry summoned the North Korean ambassador and expressed grave concerns. North Korean fishing boats have been seized many times by Russia for illegal fishing, and the North has also seized Russian boats. South Korean President Moon Jae-in says fair and balanced reporting is being prevented by so-called fake news and misleading information. President Moon was speaking at the Blue House earlier today with Christophe Deloy, Secretary General of Reporters Without Borders. He said he believes freedom of speech is the foundation of democracy, but he added that such values are being damaged by hostility between those with different opinions, competition to break stories, and the fast spread of fake news. Deloy acknowledged the positive changes seen in Korean press under the Moon administration and thanked him for his efforts. It was President Moon's first meeting with the delegation from RSF. Late last month, Japan officially removed South Korea from its whitelist of trusted trading partners. And today, South Korea has dropped Japan from its own list. The government, though, says it will make sure that local companies are not hurt by the move. Hong Yu has this report.
South Korea's Trade Ministry has revised its export and import measures for strategic materials to better control exports to countries that violate global export control systems. The most prominent change in the recent revision is the classification change of export partners into Group A1, Group A2, and Group B. Japan, for instance, has been placed in Group A2, meaning that it will face tighter export controls like those in Group B. This means that local companies shipping strategic materials to Japan or other countries listed in Group A2 will have to submit 5 different documents instead of 3 for individual items. The approval process that used to take 5 days will now take 15 days, in addition to a separate approval regarding every export. The revised measures can, however, affect around 100 local companies. To minimize the impact, the South Korean government promised to ensure transparent monitoring of exports and provide customized counseling for affected companies. Another concern is that adopting such export curbs could backfire on Seoul, especially when it filed a complaint against Tokyo's trade restrictions to the World Trade Organization. But the ministry's Director General for International Trade Policy, Lee Ho-hyun, says there is nothing to worry about.
Our revision was based on evaluations of export control systems that go against international export control agreements. But Tokyo's export curbs were politically motivated. We have enough evidence to prove that.
So far, Japan hasn't made any requests for talks, but the South Korean government emphasized that even after the revision of export and import measures for strategic materials, they're ready for talks with Japan to resolve the trade dispute between the two countries. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Blue House has launched a new website laying out South Korea's position on Japan's trade curbs in the Japanese language. The information can be found on the official website of Cheongwade, and it contains President Moon's National Liberation Day speech and Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong's briefing on the decision to quit the bilateral intelligence sharing pact with Japan. It was created so that the Japanese press can accurately deliver the Korean government's position based on credible information. And with South Korea having taken Japan off its whitelist, it looks like ties between the two are going to get worse. That's what the Japanese media are reporting. And of course, officials in Japan are not happy about the move. Lee Ji-won has more.
Tokyo has expressed regret over South Korea's decision to take Japan off of its whitelist of countries that get preferential trade treatment. Japanese media outlet NHK reported Wednesday the response from an official at the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, adding that the remark comes as Tokyo was not able to hear back from Seoul on the reasons for such a move. NHK then said the ministry will continue to ask for Seoul's reasons behind the move while analyzing how the removal from the whitelist will impact Japanese firms. Various Japanese media outlets also reported on this, calling the move a retaliation against Japan's decision to first take South Korea off its whitelist. Yomiuri Shimbun and Mainichi Shimbun further reported that the move isn't likely to have a significant toll on Japan's industries, as Korea does not produce a large portion of Japan's strategic imports. Something many papers also said was that the move does not resolve the issue and that it will further aggravate the situation. It's been nearly a year since South Korea and Japan's ties began to fall apart due to the forced labor ruling, where South Korea's Supreme Court ordered Japanese firms to compensate Koreans forced to work for the firms during Japan's colonial rule. But with South Korea not intervening in the court's ruling as Tokyo had hoped, Japan imposed retaliatory measures on Seoul, such as taking it off its whitelist of trusted trading partners. Tokyo later claimed this was due to unspecified security issues. Seoul has been continuously asking Tokyo for talks on resolving the issue through dialogue, as has the U.S. President Moon Jae-in numerous times reiterated that the door to dialogue is wide open. But with Japan firm that no talks shall take place on the trade restrictions, Seoul and Tokyo are at a standstill. However, efforts to continue diplomatic talks continue, as the two sides are reportedly seeking to hold a foreign ministers' meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly next week. That will be the first time Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa will meet her new counterpart Toshimitsu Motegi. While it's not likely that there will be any breakthrough at the meeting, an official at Seoul's foreign ministry says it is a natural step toward working things out. 이지원, Arirang News.
With a weaker local currency and concerns over Japan's trade restrictions, the price of South Korean semiconductors actually rose in August. The prices of other goods like agricultural and industrial products also went up. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
Prices of semiconductors rose in August for the first time in 13 months due to a weaker Korean won and concerns over a possible drop in supply due to Tokyo's export curves on Seoul. The Bank of Korea said on Wednesday that both import and export price indices went up last month due to the weaker local currency against the greenback. In August, the average $1 exchange rate was up nearly 3% on month to around 1,209 won against the greenback. And as the market is concerned about a possible production cut in semiconductors, there was higher demand for chips, including DRAMs, flash memory, and system semiconductors. It's been over 2 months since Japan imposed export restrictions on key materials used in making chips, with only 3 shipments bound for Seoul allowed so far. An official at the central bank said the export curves caused chip prices to go up. Some experts said the price hike is not just a temporary market reaction, but in fact, the price has begun to stabilize at a higher level. The overall export price index was up 1.5%. Other than semiconductors, the price index for industrial products was up 1.4%, led by transportation equipment and chemical products. Agriculture and fishery product prices were also up by 2.5%. Oil and coal prices, however, were down due to a fall in international oil prices. The import price index edged up 0.9% despite the fall in global oil prices. Raw material prices fell slightly, but costs went up for intermediary goods, including computers and electronics. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market action on this Wednesday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Now, the Korean government is taking Japan off its own list of trusted trading partners in response to Japan's trade curbs. To what degree is this going to affect Japanese companies, and what might Japan do about it?
South Korean companies shipping strategic goods to Japan will now have to submit 5 documents to win individual approval, which is more than the previous 3. The approval process will also take around 15 days, longer than the previous 5. Local exporters also need to go through tougher and longer procedures to win comprehensive approval to ship goods to Japan for a 2-year expiry, shorter than the 3-year period granted for trusted countries. The impacts on Japanese economy and business are likely to be limited, however. Though Korea's new export regulation toward Japan is to respond to Japan's retaliatory export restriction, it is not Seoul's best interest to reduce export to Japan, considering South Korea's large amount of the trade deficit against Japan. Seoul's best response would be to rather increase exports to Japan and decrease imports from Japan at the same time. This implies that the new scheme is less likely to be harshly implemented in the approval processes, and Japan is not likely to intensify retaliation in response to Seoul's move.
Well, now, Dr. Huang, U.S. stocks, to change the topic, you might think would have taken a beating from the attack on the Saudi Arabia oil facilities. But with the Fed Open Markets Committee meeting this week, they were up on Tuesday. Korean stocks up today too. Take us through the global markets.
U.S. stocks ended slightly higher Tuesday, but gains were kept as the Federal Reserve kicked off a 2-day monetary policy meeting. Crude oil gave back some of Monday's 15% surge as Saudi officials said they had restored just under half the output lost at the outbreak plant, one of the world's biggest oil facilities. The S&P 500 index posted a small advance, with dividend-paying real estate shares faring best. 10-year Treasury yields fell towards 1.8%, and the dollar weakened after the New York Fed took actions to calm money markets. Stocks in Asia closed mixed as investors awaited the outcome of the Federal Reserve's policy meeting. Equity indexes in Japan edged down, while Hong Kong traded flat. Stocks of oil companies in Asian region mostly slipped in Wednesday trade, following a sharp drop in crude prices overnight after Saudi Arabia signaled its oil supply could return to normal soon. Japan's Nikkei fell 0.18%, while South Korea's Kospi gained 0.41% today.
Now, the Saudi attacks may have clouded the economic outlook somewhat. At the same time, the FOMC's meeting, an interest rate cut has been widely expected. What do you think the Fed's going to do with rates this week?
The Fed's meeting is scheduled to end Wednesday, when the central bank is expected to announce its latest decision on monetary policy. The Fed is largely expected to cut rates by 25 basis points. That would be the central bank's second rate cut of year 2019. While a 25 basis point rate cut is seen as near certain, investors look to the statement and economic projections from Fed policymakers, given signs of deep disagreements among them. The ongoing U.S.-China trade war has raised policymakers' concern about slowing factory output, although resilient U.S. domestic consumption has given hawks some reasons to worry about cutting rates too hastily. With economic reports decidedly mixed in recent weeks, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell must bridge continued sharp divisions among Fed policymakers, many of whom favored no rate decrease in July. The central bank is likely to reiterate that uncertainties about its outlook remain, and the Fed will act as appropriate to sustain the expansion. Any changes to that language would signal some pushback against the expectations of a third rate cut later in year 2019.
All right, Dr. Wang, we'll see what they say in a day or two. We'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
Now, as just discussed, Saudi Arabia's oil output is reportedly expected to return to normal levels within the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's a lot quicker than some had thought, and that's causing global oil prices to come back down. Kim Yo-sun reports.
Global oil prices, which has spiked following last weekend's drone attacks on 2 of Saudi Arabia's key oil facilities, seem to be stabilizing at a faster pace than originally projected. Oil prices dropped over 5% on Tuesday after Saudi Arabia's energy minister said the kingdom has successfully restored its oil production. As of Tuesday morning, West Texas Intermediate crude was trading at just under $60 a barrel, down 5% from the previous day. Brent crude also dropped by over 5%, trading at around $65 a barrel. Oil prices soared nearly 15% on Monday in response to the attacks. Citing Saudi government sources, Reuters reports the country's oil output is expected to be back to normal within the next 2 to 3 weeks. This comes as U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said on Tuesday that Washington is reviewing evidence that suggests Iran was behind the attacks and the U.S. is ready to defend its allies in the Middle East. Speaking at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, he stressed that President Trump will determine the best course of action in the coming days. This comes after Trump hinted Sunday on possible military action, saying the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded. Pence also revealed that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo left for Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to discuss countermeasures to the attacks. On a related note, a senior U.S. official told CBS News on Tuesday that the drones were launched from southern Iran at the northern end of the Persian Gulf. The official said the exact location had been identified, from which some 20 drones and cruise missiles were launched against Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in spoke on the phone this morning with the leader of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, about last weekend's drone attack on the kingdom's oil facilities. According to the Blue House, President Moon relayed words of comfort to the prince and to the Saudi people. Moon also said that such an attack threatening global energy security must not be repeated, and that South Korea fully supports international efforts to eradicate terrorism. He noted that 30% of South Korea's oil supply comes from Saudi Arabia and said he hopes the facilities can be rebuilt quickly, offering South Korea's help if needed. South Korea and Saudi Arabia have agreed to set up a joint research center on developing nuclear energy for the kingdom. They signed 2 MOUs on Tuesday on the sidelines of the IAEA's General Conference in Vienna. South Korea's science ministry says officials from both sides agreed to boost cooperation to support the creation and licensing of a small, smart nuclear reactor. They'll also work on developing the next generation model of SMART, or the System Integrated Modular Advanced Reactor, which was originally developed by Korea for small and remote areas. The city of Seoul is running a car-free week through this Sunday. The city hopes to reduce air pollution from cars, cut greenhouse gas emissions, and encourage more people to use public transportation. Sunday will be Seoul Car-Free Day, so the city will block off Sejongdae-do Street from Gwanghwamun to Seoul Plaza and hold an eco-friendly event there. Starting in the late 90s in Europe, now some 2,000 cities in 47 countries hold a car-free day. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
change is now affecting every corner of the world, resulting in record heat waves and melting glaciers, among many other side effects.